Well, hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Political State Podcast. I'm Ben Felder from the Oklahoman, here in the Oklahoman's podcast studio, a special Monday edition, normally recorded at the end of the week. We're starting the week off with this episode. It is September 9th. Joining me in the studio is the Oklahoman's Kayla Branch. Kayla, how are you?
Doing well. What about you?
I'm doing pretty good. You have a good weekend?
I did. Very relaxing. It was a nice downtime. It's been a very busy time of year, so it's always good to find some space. Yeah,
definitely. Well, we are back at it for another week, and our guest this week, also in the studio, is Oklahoma County Commissioner Carrie Blumert, a return guest. We were talking about this before. I guess January was your first time on, and here you are back twice in 1 year. That's pretty good.
Yes, yes. I will chalk it up as I'm your favorite guest.
I think we had an enjoyable conversation. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say not.
I won't put you in that spot.
But we definitely were happy to have you back. And one of the reasons we want to talk to you is a city issue, but relates to a lot of the stuff you've been talking to at the county level. Yeah. First year in the county commissioner seat, jail reform, criminal justice reform is something you've talked quite a bit about. We've talked to you about. Kayla's written about this. The MAPS 4 proposals that were announced a couple weeks ago and were approved by the council, which is slated for an election on December 10th, includes a lot of things that we haven't seen in past MAPS. I mean, a program that's typically been focused on big capital projects like convention centers and parks and streetcars and stadiums has quite a bit of social services. Mm-hmm. And one of those things is something that you talked about and advocated for. I kind of want to talk to you about that process. And that's, so it's $22 million for construction of a restoration center housing mental health and addiction services, $11 million for 2 mental health crisis centers, and $7 million for transitional housing kind of geared towards the county jail.
Yes.
Correct? So unpack these proposals, because this was something that when you were lobbying for, you were having your own town hall meetings trying to get this included in the proposal.
Yes. So about 6 or 8 months ago, the mayor and I sat down and talked about how can MAPS help the county jail. There was never a plan for MAPS to include funding for a new jail, but the mayor came to me and said, how can MAPS help you? And I said, we need more facilities outside of the jail to treat people with mental illness and addiction. So I spent all summer talking to every mental health and addiction provider and agency that I could get in contact with. We met with North Care, Red Rock, Hope, the Recovery Center, OKC Metro Alliance, Voice. So we tried to reach out to not only providers, but grassroots organizations, NAMI, which serves families of people with mental illness. We talked with law enforcement, the sheriff's office, staff inside of our jail. I talked with the new chief of police, and it became very apparent that the highest need was more crisis centers. So when people are experiencing mental health crisis, or they are experiencing some type of overdose, they will call 911, and the police will take them either to a crisis center, to an emergency room, or to the jail. And we toured we have 2 crisis centers here in Oklahoma County, and we toured them, and there are not enough beds. Because of a federal law, if you are billing Medicaid and you're providing mental health services, you can only have 16 beds in your facility. So it really limits how many people those facilities can serve. In several conversations with Commissioner White at the Department of Mental Health, she said this is a huge need across the entire state. So if MAPS could pay for more mental health crisis centers in Oklahoma County, that would be incredible. So that became a huge part of it, was more crisis centers.
And so there's 2 in Oklahoma County.
There's 2 currently.
16-bed cap. So we're looking at, 32 beds right now?
One of the crisis centers has kind of gotten a way around that, and they have created an urgent care side of their facility where someone could come in for up to 24 hours and get medication, get sleep, see a doctor, talk with a nurse, talk with a social worker, and get a treatment plan in place. But they can only stay there for 24 hours because of that 16-bed cap. So the crisis center out by the fairgrounds, it's out on General Pershing, they have their 16 beds for people who might need 3, 4, 5 days of stabilization, and then they have that urgent care side where they can serve about 20 more people for up to 24 hours each. So it expands how many people they can serve, but it still is people. Oftentimes, people need more treatment than just 24 hours. So those 2 new crisis centers that we got included in MAPS, if it passes, fingers crossed, each of those will have 16 beds plus that urgent care side with around 20. It can serve around 20 more people. So each crisis center will serve at a time around 35 people, which still is not ideal. We'd like them to be a little bit bigger, but that is what we're dealing with right now. We're working with Congresswoman Kendra Horn to see if we can get some legislation at the federal level to either change that law or have a way around it, because it doesn't really do us a whole lot of good. So the crisis centers became evident, and especially law enforcement. They said we need more safe places to take people who are in crisis so that we do not have to take them to the jail. Because oftentimes right now they're taking people to jail who are in crisis, who just need treatment. We then discovered San Antonio, Bexar County, has a center called the Restoration Center, and it is a crisis center, but it has all these other services related to addiction. So it's mental health and addiction, and they have been operating for about 10 years, and they said they have diverted 60,000 bookings from their jail over 10 years. With this center. So we had several calls with the directors of the center. We did a lot of research, and it became apparent that this would be an incredible asset to Oklahoma City and an incredible asset to our jail by diverting lots of people from getting booked into jail who are committing very low-level crimes simply because they have untreated mental illness and addiction. Yeah. So the Restoration Center, we started using that phrase. I'm not tied to that name to name it here in Oklahoma City, but that's just the name we came up with.
So it'll just be a facility by the jail then? Is that the plan, or what?
That's our hope, but my hope is that we have a new jail someday. So I can't, as of right now, I can't say where it's going to be, because my hope is that it's near the new jail. But there's a lot of pieces that have to fall into place for that to be true. It has to be easily accessible for law enforcement, so I would think somewhere centrally located in Oklahoma City. The 2 other standalone crisis centers will probably be more, whether it's north and south of the city or east and west, those will probably be more spread out.
Yeah.
So, and then another thing that became apparent in all of our discussions was housing for people who have mental illness, who are currently homeless. If they get booked into jail, or if they go to an emergency room, or if they go to the crisis center, when we discharge you and when you've received your treatment and we let you go, you are going right back to homelessness, and you are probably going to come back into the system within a matter of days. So we went and toured a housing facility in Tulsa called the Yale Apartments, and talked with all the residents, walked in and saw the rooms, and felt like this was something that Oklahoma City could benefit from. So included in our MAPS proposal is a single site, almost like an apartment complex, with 30 units, and they will probably function almost like efficiency apartments, small apartments, small dorm room type rooms. So we proposed 30 of those, and that housing site will be temporary, so it will not become someone's permanent home. It will be more of a 3 to 6 month. You're currently homeless, you have mental illness, you've gotten care at the crisis center, you're stable. We can transition you immediately into housing for 3, 6, 8 months, connect you with a case manager, and help you figure out a treatment plan and connect you with more permanent housing. So that a lot of people have said to me, 30 is not enough. So because they are transitional, because they're not permanent, we anticipate that those 30 units will be turning over pretty regularly. The Department of Mental Health said that between the two crisis centers here in Oklahoma County and Griffin Memorial Hospital in Norman, which is a psychiatric hospital, on average every year they discharge 400 people back to homelessness who are leaving the crisis center or leaving Griffin Memorial. That is over a 365 days. So our hope is to stop those 400 people from being discharged back to homelessness. Yeah. So that is our package, or 2 standalone crisis centers, the restoration center, which includes addiction treatment and crisis beds, and then transitional housing.
Yeah. So I'm curious, this vote is tentatively slated for December 10th. This is along the lines of an issue you've talked a lot about, and I think it's fair to kind of credit part of your election to him. This was something you talked about on the campaign trail. We've seen the election of some council members who've talked about this and other kind of social services. Do you think a project like this makes MAPS more likely to pass? Or, I mean, it's tough to unpack MAPS because it's been successful. It's had a lot of support. It'll be interesting to see what another MAPS vote looks like in today's current political environment. But this shift towards kind of the social services, I mean, I'll admit, my Twitter bubble is happy about these kind of things, and more critical of the larger projects. But I don't know if that's really the pulse of the whole city. Do you feel like that these types of projects makes MAPS more likely to be supported by a majority of the population, or does that present new challenges and now you have to convince voters who have traditionally said we want these big sports stadiums, streetcars, parks, big capital projects, but we're not sure putting it towards criminal justice is what we want?
Yeah. So when I was campaigning in 2018, most of my conversations when I was knocking on doors revolved around the jail, because that's the issue that I would bring up first. And I would say 9 out of 10 people were aware that we were taking people to jail with mental illness who didn't need to be there. Most of my voters had a pretty good understanding of that issue, and they basically said, whatever you can do to keep people with mental illness out of the jail, do it. As long as you're keeping the community safe, we support it. So like you, I have a Twitter bubble that is very excited that we're including more human needs in MAPS. But from what I heard on the campaign trail, people want to put their government resources and tax dollars toward mental health services. I think mental health and addiction are, you can't talk to someone who hasn't been affected by it in some way, whether it's themselves or their mom or their kid or someone in their family or in their friend circle. So I think people are realizing that it's time we address it. And I don't know if we could have included something like this in the first 1 or 2 MAPS. Yeah. I think now that MAPS has such a positive public image and people trust it, I think now is the perfect time to include something like this.
Yeah, that's definitely what I've heard from folks that I've been talking to, is that they saw the success that MAPS had and the growth that it caused downtown and throughout the city, and now they're wanting to take that and apply it to more of those complex social issues.
Yes. And as we know, MAPS does not pay for operational dollars.
Right.
So we have been in conversations with Department of Mental Health Association, the Recovery Center, some foundations to figure out how are we going to fund these facilities long term. The state just got word that they're receiving quite a bit of money from the opioid settlement. I don't know when the state will see that money. There's probably a lot of appeals that are going to happen. But I would love to get some of that money to fund the restoration center. Again, lots of puzzle pieces have to fall into place for that to happen, and lots of people have to get on board. So,
yeah. Well, and I think it speaks to, and you're right. I mean, I'm sure there's segments of the population that are skeptical of projects like this, but it does seem to be that there is this continued shift towards this kind of more, I guess we won't put a label on it, kind of a more progressive view of politics. And we've talked about that, especially here in Oklahoma City. And I was thinking about this over the weekend, too. Our colleague Josh Delaney of the Oklahoman on Saturday covered a memorial service for a gentleman who passed away, Bob Waldrop. And I was looking up some articles. So Bob is kind of a volunteer or a coordinator of different volunteer programs. He'd worked at a kind of a grocery program providing groceries for shut-ins and families that weren't able to get to the grocery store. As a prolific organist at his church. Anyways, Bob ran for city council in 2015. I don't know if you remember that election. I was thinking about this.
I don't think so.
So Bob ran for city
Which
council.
Seat?
He ran against Meg Sawyer.
Ward 6.
Okay. Yeah. Currently Jo Beth Hammond. And he came within, I want to say it was like 10 points. So it wasn't like I mean, it wasn't like Sawyer, who was an established incumbent, won, by the narrowest of margins, but it was pretty close.
Yeah.
I mean, it was shockingly close, especially considering that Bob had almost no money to spend on it. He was very consistent to his message that this renovation of Oklahoma City has ignored or even come at the expense of our most needy.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of the first. I think it was a wake-up call for a lot of people in city politics. It may have been the first wake-up call to someone like Sawyer, not to criticize, her. We've had her on the program before and talked about her legacy. It may have been the time where she says, well, maybe things are starting to shift a little bit to where it started to pave the way for a Joe Beth Hammond.
Yeah.
We can kind of definitely see that race. So, I think the Maps vote's going to be interesting. Everybody assumes Maps is a slam dunk because it's always been, and it probably is likely to pass. I don't know. I feel like we're in a political era now where if people who don't like one thing will throw the whole thing out.
Correct.
I mean, that's just kind of where we're at today in politics. But it will be interesting to see if it gets even more support because there's a focus on issues that traditionally have not been a priority for the city and county.
And if you look at the shift in demographic of those who voted in 2018, yes, our electorate in Oklahoma City is still in the more senior adult category, but you saw a lot more people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s show up to vote in 2018. And I think that's good for this Maps. If those people show up and vote, we can't assume it's a slam dunk. We have to, I think, I know tomorrow I say tomorrow, I don't know when you all are going to be listening to this.
You posted today. Today's Monday, so go ahead and say tomorrow.
Tomorrow, Tuesday, September 10th, there's going to be a press conference from the chamber and lots of other groups who are kind of kicking off the public campaign. And so you'll start seeing stuff online, on TV, in your mailbox, promoting Maps. So there's still a lot of work to be done to educate voters to go vote.
Yeah. What do you feel like how would you describe kind of the relationship between the city and county? I mean, this is a city program.
Yeah.
And it seems like in the past, the city wasn't really eager to get involved in county issues. Now, a lot of that was about the construction of a new jail. We'll get into that here in a little bit. But you essentially had, the mayor of Oklahoma City saying, we'd like to take some of our money and put it towards, a county programs that do impact us, but county programs nonetheless.
Yeah. I got a lot of questions about that when we were giving our proposal to City Council, which happened 2 or 3 weeks before City Council actually voted on the package. And these facilities that I put forward into the package are probably not going to be, quote, county-run facilities, just because Oklahoma County government has never run and operated a crisis center, That really is the bailiwick of the Department of Mental Health and places like North Care, Red Rock, Mental Health Association. So what will probably happen is the MAPS dollars will pay for the construction. The city will coordinate all of that and then release an RFP. And groups who already operate these types of facilities can apply and can submit a bid. That's probably what will happen. But I plan to stay pretty involved just because this has kind of been my baby from the beginning. Yeah. But it will not be necessarily a county-run building or facility. That the county might put resources toward it. I'm very open to that because it will benefit our jail. And that I think it was Councilman Greenwell asked me during the presentation. He said, "Is the county willing to put resources and money toward this because it's going to benefit you?" And I said, "I'm certainly willing to have that conversation, but I'm one of 3 board members on the commission, and I know Brian and Kevin, my other commissioners, have been publicly supportive of mental health and addiction treatment." So those are conversations that will happen down the line.
But this isn't just this isn't just addressing a county issue, right?
Correct.
I mean, in a way, a lot of the focus is on the jail, which is the county facility. And once again, we'll get into that here in just a moment. But so you have a jail that's in need of improvement, rebuilt. But you also have too many people in that jail.
Yes.
Right? Okay. And that's not a county issue per se.
Correct.
The bulk of that responsibility lies with the city, right?
Yes. So about 75% of the people who are brought to our county jail are brought by Oklahoma City Police Department, and that is the nature of Oklahoma City is the largest municipality in the county.
And so if they are continuing to arrest many individuals who need some type of treatment and not just to be locked up, I mean, this is really a program to address that issue, which is a city issue. I mean, it's everyone's issue, but it's kind of more of a city issue.
Yes. And a couple months ago, Commissioner Mon did an op-ed in the Oklahoman, and he proposed the topic was MAPS should include mental health. And he proposed that every municipality in the county should essentially pay into funding mental health. So that's also, I think, a really great idea. That those are conversations that will happen later on. But I could see the Restoration Center being a county-wide facility that every municipality pays into in some way or has an agreement with in some way.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's talk about the county jail and the politics of that. Kayla, can you kind of catch us up real quick on where we stand? Because there's been a lot of movement with the jail trust and moving towards an outside administrator, and kind of where do things stand now for the county jail?
Yeah, definitely. So since the jail was built, there have been serious problems, escapes, deaths, lots of inmate on detention officer violence, a lot of suicides. It's been a real problem. There have been structural issues, mold, all sorts of things that have gone wrong over the 28-life period of this jail. And people have known that it's been an issue, and it's really just taken 2 decades to get to a point where there was enough political will within the public, enough elected officials who were really focusing in on this issue to start the process of really making significant change. And what that has looked like in the last few years, and really in just the last few months, was the creation of multiple committees to study the jail and see, what are some tangible steps we can take to make our current situation better. And then the creation of the Oklahoma County Jail Trust, which happened this May. And in the last few months since they've been meeting, just here recently, they've voted to hire an outside jail administrator who they believe will come in with fresh perspectives and new ideas to solve old problems. And so that's kind of where we're at now. And just in terms of the facts, but politically, and there has been, I think, a lot of people have been frustrated, and I know that
a lot of drama.
Yes, there's been a lot of drama, and I know particularly Oklahoma County Sheriff P.D. Taylor has been, pretty vocal about his not that he's against the trust per se, because he's made this very clear, and he's not against the trust, but he is against hiring an outside jail administrator. He kind of feels as if since he took over 2 years ago, he's made a lot of changes, and in 2 years the jail population has gone down, and things have gotten better from where they were during the life of the jail, but there is still a lot of room for improvement. So he's been frustrated that they're making these changes without kind of acknowledging the progress that his administration has made, but it's really just been a long time coming, that we're at this point now where we're going to hire someone who's going to come in and hopefully have a wealth of experience and knowledge in running a jail rather than being a law enforcement officer, and hopefully we'll see some fixes there. And I think too, kind of to your point about wanting to build a new jail, that there is the hope from elected officials who were pushing for this change, that the public will see this as we take this seriously, and we realize that these problems need to be fixed, and we're going to do whatever it takes, because the county went to the voters multiple times over the last 2 decades and said, we need more money to build a new jail. And the public basically said, no, you don't know what you're doing. We're not going to do that. And so I think the hope is now maybe they will.
So, so do you see that, Commissioner, as this is kind of if we're going to get to the point where you're going to be asking the public to spend more money on a county jail, that first there needs to be some proof that some of the drama can be taken out of it, that there is kind of a more focused plan on bringing improvements to the jail.
And putting the jail trust authority into place, it's a 9-member board of trustees, and I think the big intention of that was not only to make big changes at the jail, but to build trust with the voters and to show the voters that we have this brand new board of oversight over what's going on at the jail. The sheriff is no longer the only one making decisions. And I think Sheriff Taylor and I have a very good relationship, and he and I talk frequently. But his predecessor Yes, he continued to get reelected, but he did not run an effective jail at all. And that's why the public kept voting down those sales tax initiatives, because they didn't trust the way that the jail was being run. So I think having the 9-member board, the 9-member board of trustees, I think, in my opinion, will help build credibility with the public.
Yeah, I mean, I think you go with this trust, you say, hey, look, we are doing some things that we haven't done in the past. You also kind of triple your number of advocates. I mean, that's kind of tough if you want to go to the public and advocate for, a countywide election. I mean, the city can do that. I mean, especially if it's got, other partners like the chamber and stuff on board. But with many more council members, I mean, they've got someone in every corner of the city kind of advocating for that. There's only 3 of you, right?
Yeah.
And so 9, I mean, it sounds kind of simple.
Right,
It sounds kind of simple, but some of the trust members include former city manager Jim Couch, and I mean, who are some of the other members?
Former Lieutenant Governor Todd Lamb, former State Senator Ben Brown, Tricia Everest, Sue Ann Arnall.
So people with some positions of
yes, and then Francie Ekwerekwu is a public defender.
Your former police chief
M.T. Barry.
Yeah.
Sheriff Taylor.
And one county commissioner sits on it, and right now it's Kevin Calvi.
Okay, so if you're wanting to put forward a countywide election, I mean, it's not a bad group to have to try to have some sway and trying to convince. Maybe not a bad group to have for some in terms of donating to a campaign.
Yes.
But so going back to January, last time you were on the show, we talked about it at the top of the show. I remember one of the things that you kind of predicted for the years, you felt like at some point within your first year there would be some kind of plan or proposal to bring a vote to the people to build a new jail. I mean, I know MAPS is kind of focused on that. I'm not saying we're holding you to it, that we are coming up at the end of the year.
You must have gone back and watched that.
But I'm curious, not if you think it's still going to happen necessarily before we get to January, because I don't know that that's the case. But how likely do you think it is that we will, in the near future, see a jail election?
So when I last came on the show, I think it was mid-January.
That's right.
I did not anticipate that we would create a trust that quickly.
Okay.
I thought it might take us a year to 2 years to create a trust. And little did I know, May 22nd, we would vote to create a trust. And I think it all worked out the way it was supposed to work out. So now that decision you just asked me about is really in the hands of the trust. Mm-hmm. Now, the county commissioners are the ones that approve what goes on the ballot. We take a vote on if it's a bond issue, if it's a sales tax, whatever it is. But the trust is who will come to us and say, this is how we want to fund it. This is how we want to do it. So my hope is that it's in the next year. But they are pretty focused right now on hiring their administrator. Mm-hmm. And I would assume that once they get the administrator in place, that they are they are working with the administrator to see what changes can be made before they decide we need a new building. The trust has never had an open discussion, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kayla, the trust has never had an open discussion about, do we need a new facility? And I know Ben Brown has, right now he said, I'm not in support of a new facility. Whereas I think Francie Ekwerekwu, who is my appointee, I think she is ready for a new facility. So it'll be interesting to see when the trust chooses to have that conversation, and if they can choose an administrator that they feel like makes enough changes. So that is my wonky answer to your question.
Yeah, no, it's a good answer. And I think you're right, you kind of have to go through the motions again because you have this new body, right?
Yes.
And I know that as, reading some of Kayla's story about the early meetings of the trust and some of the things that they're discussing and some of the things that they want to study, my initial thought is like, geez, we've done this.
Yeah.
like where have you been?
Yeah.
Like, and there's been some moments on the trust, like, there's some problems at the jail. Like,
It's
but that's what you have to do when you have a new body put together. I mean, you kind of have to let them lead. In fact, it's kind of, you kind of want it to be their idea, right?
Yeah.
You want the trust to say, you know what?
Yes.
We may need a new jail.
And the trust, from a legal standpoint, is meant to be very separate from the Board of County Commissioners and from the Budget Board. That's its purpose, is to not remove liability from the county, but create this separate entity that's going to govern the jail. So if the commissioners or the budget board sit there and try to tell the trust what to do, that's not going to work. It's not going to work at all.
Yeah.
So I try to keep in close contact with several of the trust members just to give them information. I almost never tell them you should do this or you should vote this way. I am simply there to give them information and to answer their questions.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think too some of it goes back to that point about building trust, that they want people to know that we're taking our time, we listen to everything we've been collecting, non-biased information, and so that it does have not just the appearance of, oh, we tried, but that there is something to point back
doing
to.
our due diligence. Yeah.
Well, and we'll get a good indication in December, or at least somewhat of an indication on what the public thinks. I mean, if the maps, and a lot of factors will be at play, but I mean, if maps passes by just a point or two, they may say, wow, it was successful, but having this intense focus on social issues can be a heavy lift.
Yeah.
And it's probably a whole different ball game when you have, on one hand, you have a MAPS program that has a lot of social projects, but still has some of those big capital projects, versus a dedicated tax to a new jail.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably a whole different campaign.
Yeah.
And probably there's probably
no
a lot
idea
more.
What that campaign is going to look like.
Probably a lot more skepticism from the public.
Yes. And in my opinion, I think if we ever go to the voters for some type of sales tax, I would hope that we would portray it as, this is a criminal justice reform tax. This is not, this is not just a tax so the county can have a brand new, big jail. If I were to try to convince a voter right now to support a half cent or a full cent or a quarter cent or whatever for a new jail, I would pose it as, this is criminal justice reform.
Yeah.
This will pay for a new mental health wing in the jail. This will pay for space for programming in the jail. This is not just another 13-story facility.
So would you see, let's say MAPS is successful, it passes, you've got this money for a restoration center and these other things. Would it be time to jump on that, to say, okay, well, now maybe we should build a new facility so that we can, because this can be the place where we put it?
It's my opinion, yes. But again, I'm not a trustee on the trust right now. And I only speak for one of 3 commissioners. But yes, I would think we can capitalize on, the public is supportive of social programming, using MAPS dollars for human needs. It's time for us to continue investing and build a new jail that's a lot more humane, a lot more focused on rehabilitation. So the next year will be really interesting of what happens in December and what happens with the administrator and what happens with potentially a new facility.
Yeah.
So
interesting. Well, we'll have you back on in 10 months, and I'll ask you, where is that new jail tax you promised on this episode?
Gosh.
You promised we'd have a vote.
It's so interesting to think back. I mean, I remember that day of walking in here. It feels like it was ages ago.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was I really do think it was my first week. I didn't know. I mean, I knew what I needed to know at the time, but the amount that I have learned in the last 9 to 10 months is, I feel like my brain has grown 2 sizes.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we appreciate you coming in and updating us on some of the things that are going on.
Thank you for having
me.
me.
Yeah, always good talking to you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great conversation, and we'll look forward to having it again.
Thank you.
Carrie and Kayla, thanks for your time. I'm Ben Felder with the Oklahoman. This has been another episode of Political State. We'll see you again next week.